What's up, guys? Today we're going to be going over my first of many prismatic builds in the final shape. This one will be on Titan, focusing on the Consecration aspect, and this build is just pure awesome. The amount of damage output, the Ackler, it's great for champions. It really just ticks all of the boxes. So as I said, building around Consecration, where when you slide you can activate your solar melee that will first scorch, then you can slam the ground and ignite the targets that have been scorched. And you're going to want to run Frenzy Blade with this aspect because you will have 3 charges of the melee, and as you slide around, it'll change to the solar one. So we're just using the Frenzy Blade as like a way to get 3 charges, and that's it. First thing we want to talk about is the damage. So with Knockout, once we get any target to critical health, so basically just killing a red bar, we'll get Knockout, and that'll increase the melee range, melee damage, and give you health regen. And looking at damage on Carl, Knockout will be a 2x melee damage increase, and it will turn all of your base melees into arc melees, which is kind of cool for some of the fragments we'll be using. And looking at damage on Carl, now with Knockout, it does roughly like 35% of his health. One thing to note is that all these melee increases will not increase the damage of the ignition itself, which is a chunk of the total damage. This will obviously stack with Synthoceps, and right now we just have the base gauntlets, but when this video goes live, it'll be once we can start farming the exotic class items, so we should be able to pair the melee increase in the right of Synthoceps with a different exotic in the left, so I'll probably be talking about that in a future video, and what combos you could do instead. But with just what we have right now, when I'm making this video with the Synthoceps, it's going to be roughly a 3x increase, now doing almost like 60% of the health of Carl. And now we could go 2 different directions with this build. The first is going to be Courage for the Fragment, where our light abilities will do more damage to darkness debuff targets. We can use the Shackle Grenade or just the base Frenzied Blade, but obviously we're using our melee charges for the Consecration, so you want to use the Shackle Grenade, and this Fragment will be a 10% increase to ability damage, which is very nice. You could go the other path of using Dominance to make our Void Grenade weaken, and for this you would have to use Suppressor Grenade, the only Void Grenade on Prismatic Titan, and this will be a 15% weaken, which all Void weakens are, which is 5% more than that of the Courage. You could go ahead and use both at the same time, the Void Weaken Grenade and the Frenzied Blade to proc Sever, which is a Darkness debuff to get both the 10% and 15%, but I think there's better uses of the fragments, and you only really have room for one of the 2. And I would use the Void Weaken because it's not only higher damage, it also is a faster base cooldown on the Suppressor Grenade. So that's the way I'm going to be going with this build. And as we'll talk about later, it works out better for champion gameplay. So all around, just a better choice. But look at the total damage of this melee with everything we have going on. With just the Void Weaken, it's 310,000. With both, if you were going to go that route, it was 337. And now looking at the Ackler and the total build overall, we have Dawn to become Radiant. We have Blessing to start health regeneration whenever we get a melee final blow. Then we have Balance to help get our melee back with light damage kills, which does work with Consecration itself. And we have Ruin to increase the area of the solar ignitions, and finally Dominance, as we showed off for the weekend. And the main weapon you want to use is Monte Carlo. I love this thing. I've been using Ehroars a lot like the last year, and this will feed back into our melee by doing damage and getting kills, having a chance to fully restore a melee charge. And the way it works with the Frenzied Blade 3 melees is whenever you get a final blow that will restore a melee charge, it's only one at a time, it's not all 3, but if you use Monte Carlo, you're going to be having your melee all the time with this build. So overall, the gameplay loop is you just use your Consecration melee to proc Radiant and ×5 of the Monte Carlo perk. Then you go crazy with the Monte Carlo for a bit with both buffs active. And generally by the time you shoot like a full mag, you will have your melee back. Use it and rinse and repeat. It's just an infinite loop. And the one that I hear about using Monte Carlo is people just don't want to use it because they don't think it's a good exotic. Well, first off, it definitely is a more than fine exotic weapon. ARs feel really nice right now, and this one outputs a lot of damage. But even if it was like not the greatest of primaries, the fact that it can give you infinite consecrations that do over 300k damage in a huge radius makes it worth no matter what. When you use an exotic like this to feed into a broken ability build, you have to look at Monte Carlo as if it is the infinite melees, because it is the thing that is allowing you to do that. But moving on from that little rant, the catalyst on the Monte Carlo is also very nice on this build. The melee damage of the bayonet does not stack with knockout, which is unfortunate. That would be like kind of broken, but it will stack with the Synthoceps buff being a 3x. Taking damage on this red bar to over 300k, but look at damage on Carl with the weaken. I believe that's like really all you can buff him with. The damage was 148,000, which is not bad for a free melee that you can have very often. Look at the rest of the build on the armor mods. A lot of these are going to be feeding into my melee, getting my melee back, and the melee damage itself feeding into the grenade. That way we have the weakened grenade more often. But a lot of the mods are the straightforward options. There's not too much diversity anymore with mods. There's really only like 1 or 2 paths you can go with most builds in the game. Another ability I didn't show off I'm using is Thruster, just because it's a faster cooldown than either of the barricades. That way we can proc outreach, distribution, and powerful attraction more often. And finally, the super of choice is kind of what everyone to use. I'm rocking the new one because it's new and it feels pretty good. It might be the best choice, but you could choose your super based off the artifact mod this season. This one right here, Elemental Siphon, where rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon creates a matching elemental pickup based off your super. So if you wanted melee back, you could run Stasis. Or if you wanted your grenade back, you could run Solar Super instead. Another artifact mod that helps this build is right here, where once we're amplified, we have DR, and knockout will constantly make us amplified, so we'll always have that extra DR. And overall, that is the build. It is not only very, very fun, it is super effective versus everything for accurate single target damage. Where this really excels is heavy group actor with very high health targets. So I was using this in the raid on normal mode, which is still -5 power and not Solar Search when I was playing at least. And this in first, second, fourth, and fifth encounter even was just so good. In the first encounter, all the rooms where there's all the like red bars and there's like a Hydra or a Overload Champion, this will just kill all of them in just a single melee. The Hydra, the Overload Champion, they're just all dead. It does so much damage in such a large radius that you just have to try this build out. And then in the raid, while still -5, all these subjugators, as long as I was surrounded when I used my melee, so either in like the first encounter, the fifth encounter, it would just one-shot them as long as I was surrounded. Like, that's how much damage this thing does. And as I mentioned, this build is great for champion gameplay. With Radiant, you're going to be constantly giving all of your weapons anti-barrier rounds. Then you have the Suppressor Grenade for Overload. And then you have Ignitions to stop Unstoppable. So you can cover all 3 very easily with this build. And it's not tied to the artifact in any way. It's straight through all of your abilities. So I can just see this being one of the all-around best builds in the game for the foreseeable future. And definitely something worth checking out and trying yourself. Anyways, like usual, I think that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Catch us next time.